Hey guys, tonight we journey to a place that once glittered with gold, echoed with prayers in 10 languages, and smelled, well, not great. You're standing in the heart of Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire. The year is somewhere around 541 AD, but don't bother checking your watch. It's broken, and your street has bigger problems. The air is heavy, unusually still, and laced with a sweetness that doesn't belong. You hear carts clattering over stones, cloaks rustling in the dark, and something squeaking in the shadows that makes you reconsider your route. Welcome to the dawn of the plague of Justinian. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're moving slowly through the city's narrow alleys, the kind with crooked balconies that lean too close together and laundry lines that never dry. You catch the scent of frankincense from a nearby chapel, but it's overpowered by something sour. Not sewage exactly, more like the ghost of yesterday's fish stew gone wrong. First, it's just a few people coughing. You brush past an old man muttering in Latin, not unusual, but then you notice his skin, blotched and waxy. His hands tremble. Behind you, a vendor's daughter is vomiting into the gutter, and her mother's still trying to sell olives as if it's just another Tuesday. You start to realize something is off, really off, but the empire doesn't scream yet. Constantinople is used to disasters. Earthquakes, riots, barbarian threats, they're part of the furniture. This is still just background noise. You pass a group of children playing beside a fountain. One is too tired to run, her feet dragging. Another has red streaks down his neck that no game could have caused. The adults nearby whisper behind veils, debating whether the fever is divine punishment, a Persian plot, or simply too much cabbage. Historians still argue whether the first victims arrived from Egypt, Syria, or some cursed merchant galley that slipped into the Golden Horn. The records are patchy, and the church was more concerned with the moral lesson than the microbial source. But you're here now and you can see it. Whatever this is, it spreads fast. You wander past the old seawalls. Once impenetrable, now they just hold in the sickness. The guards posted at the gates look paler than the marble columns behind them. One is slumped asleep or dead, you can't tell. No one seems eager to check. You duck into a side market where a few brave sellers still offer threadbare goods. A butcher hacks away at meat that's already gray around the edges. He shrugs when you glance at it. It's salted, he says. That's not very comforting. A robed monk brushes past you, clutching a tiny reliquary shaped like a toe. Saint Euphemia will protect us, he whispers. She repelled Goths once. You're not sure how that applies to fleas and fever, but he's already vanished down the alley. At night, the city becomes quiet in the wrong way. No tavern songs, no drunken priests singing hymns out of tune, no dogs barking. Just the soft rattle of carts, body carts, wheeled by men who keep their faces covered. You peer through a window and see a woman lying motionless on a bed of reeds, while a boy cries next to her, holding her hand long after it stopped being warm. You head toward the hippodrome, hoping for anything lively, but even the chariot tracks are silent. The usual crowd of gamblers and loudmouths is missing. Instead, there's a scattering of cloaked figures lighting candles and muttering prayers. Someone's drawing circles in the dust, repeating a spell in Greek you half recognize from a bad stage play. It's early days, but already the city is starting to shift. You feel it in the hesitation of every handshake, in the way priests avoid touching holy water, and in how bread sellers leave loaves on steps now, rather than handing them over. One woman spits when you ask her the time. The sun's late, she hisses, and it's bringing flies. Historians still debate whether Justinian himself knew how bad it was at first. Some say he was cocooned in imperial bliss, obsessing over codified laws and dome renovations. Others claim he was warned early but assumed it was just another bad season, like when the fish migrated too soon or the olive harvest failed. Either way, his city is changing under his gilded nose. You pass a beggar on the steps of a burnt-out bathhouse. He's not begging anymore, just lying there. The cats nearby don't even sniff him. That's when you realize the cats are gone. Fewer rats too, because even the rats are dying now. One odd detail you notice as you walk. Birds. They're circling the Hagia Sophia like they know something you don't. Superstitious types say animals always sense death first. You think about that as you lie down that night. The noise of the city now replaced by the rustle of parchment and quiet prayers echoing through shuttered windows. And still, above it all, the city glows gold. Lamps are lit, incense burned, and choirs sing like they always do. Because in Byzantium, even death is expected to dress up. You wake to the sound of bells. Not one, many. They don't ring in harmony. They clang and collide, ringing across the rooftops like panicked birds. In Constantinople, bells don't signal joy. They toll for the dead. You step into the early light, brushing sleep from your eyes as the sun creeps in through the veil of smoke and dust. The streets smell of wax, wet stone, and something underneath. Sweet, sickly, and metallic. You know it now. That smell is rot. Yet above this uneasy city, the great palace of Constantinople gleams. It's a fortress of gold mosaics, imperial porphyry, and silence. You walk through the forecourts of Justinian's palace, where guards try not to cough and eunuchs scurry with scrolls tucked under their arms like scared mice. Justinian is still ruling. Technically, you glimpse him in a vast, echoing corridor. A tired man in a too large robe, studying maps with hands that tremble slightly. The plague hasn't touched him yet, but you can see it lurking in the shadows of his eyes. His physician stands nearby, pretending not to sweat. The emperor's mind is elsewhere, his legacy, his laws, his grand reconquest of the West. He's got generals in Italy, North Africa, maybe even sniffing around Spain. Rome's ghost still dances before his eyes, and he's chasing it in silk slippers. Inside, the court is all ritual and perfume. Courtiers greet each other with practiced nods and endless sleeves. They pass trays of fruit they no longer touch. Every smile hides fear. You overhear whispers of the sickness passed like contraband gossip. Through folded notes, side glances, and murmured prayers at confession. One thing the palace is good at: pretending. They pretend the kitchens still bustle, they don't. They pretend the guest chambers are full, they're not. They pretend the wine tastes normal. Doesn't. Historians still argue whether Justinian was in denial, deluded by palace walls, or simply playing a long game with fate. Some say he thought prayer and protocol would be enough. Others believe he was too proud to show fear, especially when his enemies, both foreign and domestic, watched for weakness like hawks. You wander past the imperial library, where scribes still copy scrolls about logic, war, and medicine. One is transcribing Galen's treatise on fevers. He stops every few minutes to cough into a rag. The rag has red spots. He doesn't stop. You climb a staircase of alabaster and reach a terrace that overlooks the Bosphorus. The water looks still, too still. A handful of boats bob below. Normally, it would be full of merchant ships and fishermen shouting, but now even the sea seems hesitant. The docks are eerily quiet, and crates sit unopened, slowly molding under tarps. In the emperor's audience hall, long tapestries hang motionless. Peacocks embroidered in gold thread stare blankly. Justinian doesn't hold public court anymore. Not since 3 of his senatorial advisors died in the span of 1 week. The throne room is cleaner than ever, though, scrubbed daily with vinegar and prayers. You pass a fountain shaped like a lion. Normally, children splash here while their parents argue about taxes. Now, the only sound is the quiet drip of water and the soft flapping of pigeons. A small cat laps at the fountain and watches you with a look that says, "I know something you don't." Behind the main audience chamber is the Empress's wing. You catch a glimpse of purple velvet and jasmine perfume. Theodora is here, still present, still sharp. She holds court with only her most trusted attendants, all of whom have been tested, well sniffed, for signs of plague. She's rumored to wear a sachet of crushed emeralds to ward off sickness, tucked into her bodice. You wonder if that works. You kind of want one. Theodora doesn't flinch. Not publicly, anyway. She refuses to leave the palace or flee to the countryside. "The people are watching," she said once, probably. "Let them see I do not blink." A fringe detail you overhear. Some staff have started hiding in the unused wings of the palace. A terrified steward barricaded himself inside the imperial baths and refused to come out until his food was pushed under the door. A guard tried fasting for 3 days to cleanse his body. He collapsed during a changing of the watch. You exit through the garden, where once bright tulips now droop, unwatered. The gardeners are gone. A statue of Nike, the goddess of victory, watches over it all, half covered in ivy, half forgotten. And yet, the mechanisms of empire grind on. Decrees are still written, petitions still filed. There's still a man who takes care of the imperial pigeons, even though no one reads their messages anymore. At sunset, a private mass is held in the palace chapel. The priest speaks in a strained voice, offering blessings with gloved hands. You sit in the back pew, watching the flickering light dance off mosaics of saints who seem tired of watching humans repeat the same mistakes. The priest asks for forgiveness, mercy, and a cure, but mostly he asks for time. As the bells begin to toll again in the distance, fainter now because even bell ringers fall ill, you realize the palace has become a golden cage, a place where everyone walks quietly, talks in half sentences, and tries not to breathe too deeply. You think of Justinian, sitting in his chamber, staring out the window at a city slipping from his grasp, and he's still wearing his crown. You don't notice the rat at first. It's just a twitch in the corner of your eye, darting across a tiled floor in a shadowy corner of the harbor. You follow it, lazily at first, until curiosity pulls you deeper into the labyrinth of warehouses and ship decks that stink of old hemp, sun-warmed amphory, and drying fish guts. The rat disappears behind a crate stamped with an Egyptian seal. You lean down, squinting into the space beneath the planks, and you hear it. Not just one squeak, but dozens. Maybe more. Welcome to the shipping quarter of Constantinople, where everything comes in, spices, grain, silks, and death apparently has hitched a ride. Historians still argue whether it was a grain ship from Pelusium or a merchant galley from Aelia Capitolina that carried the first infected fleas into the city. The chronicles are vague. The records are biased. And the rats? They don't leave notes. What's clear is this. Sometime in early 541 AD, a ship docked in the imperial harbor just like 100 others had. But this one carried an invisible stowaway. Yersinia pestis. You wouldn't know it by looking. The rats themselves appear normal. Shifty, whiskered, annoying, but nothing apocalyptic. It's what they're carrying that turns them into little black-furred time bombs. The fleas feeding on their blood are hungry, mobile, and ready to switch hosts when their rodent buffet starts dropping dead. You trail behind a barrel cart being wheeled toward the grain storage vaults. The worker pushing it wipes his brow and mutters about the smell. You can smell it too now. Stale hay, salt water, and something sharp that catches in your throat. As the carts unload, rats scatter like dark marbles across the stones. One scampers up a mooring rope and disappears onto another boat, heading who knows where. Byzantium's trade network is vast. Every crate, every sack of millet, every clay amphora is a passport for pestilence. Inside the city, the fleas find new hosts, mostly humans. You rub your arm absent-mindedly, wondering if that itchy spot is a bite or just paranoia. Probably just paranoia. Probably. The funny thing is, no one blames the rats at first. They're too common to notice, too familiar. It's like blaming bricks when your house collapses. But the signs start piling up. More rats, then fewer, then none. They die off quietly, often in corners or behind stacks of firewood. Then the cats vanish. Then the dogs. Then your neighbors. You pass a fishmonger arguing with a tax collector. He doesn't want to pay dues on stock he never sold. Everyone's fasting, he complains. No appetite left in the city. The taxman writes something down and coughs. The link between rats and disease won't be understood for over 1,000 years. But if you watch closely, if you pay attention to what's dying and when you start to sense a pattern, the disease ripples outward like spilled wine, staining different corners of the empire in uneven splotches. You leave the docks and walk the Misi, the city's main thoroughfare. It's quieter than usual, but still moving. A cluster of Syriac traders unloads textiles under a canopy. One collapses mid-haggle. His companions pretend not to notice and quickly move the goods. You pass a fountain where a group of philosophers debates the cause of the illness. One blames astrology. Another insists it's vapors rising from the sewers. A third claims the empire's moral decay has angered the stars. No one suggests rats. You find your way into a bakery near the Forum. The baker looks exhausted, his apron stained. "The bread's not rising right," he mumbles. "I think even the yeast is sick." There's a strange beauty to how normal some things remain. The lamplighters still light their torches at dusk. The water carriers still shout down alleys. The street musicians, fewer now, play quieter songs. And the rats still run. Until they don't. Quirky detail. In some neighborhoods, residents start collecting rat corpses and burning them in public squares. Not because they understand disease vectors, but because of the smell, and because local holy men say the devil travels in vermin. The piles of charred fur are said to hiss and whistle as the fleas inside pop. You wander to a district near the old stadium, where rumors of death holes have begun. These are the first signs of something beyond a fever. Large swellings, buboes under the arms, in the groin, blackened skin, delirium, rapid, wrenching death. These aren't the usual sickbeds. They're sprints to the grave. A merchant wife whispers to you from her doorway. "It started after the rats left," she says, pointing to a corner where a pile of grain once Saturday. "That's where they all used to scurry. Now it's too quiet." She makes you tea mint with a hint of something bitter and keeps glancing at the floorboards. "There used to be scratching," she murmurs, "all night. Now I can't sleep because there's none." You thank her and leave as she lights another candle, her 8th of the day. There's a weird comfort in that, the background noise of vermin. When it's gone, the silence feels surgical. Unnatural, like the city's holding its breath. As you walk past the Forum of Constantine, the statues seem to watch you with blank curiosity. Maybe they've seen this before. Rome had its plagues. Athens too. Human bodies are not new to ruin. And neither, apparently, are rats. You drift through the streets in a daze now. The bells won't stop. They toll at odd hours. No rhythm, no pattern. Just a slow, mournful clang echoing off the marble facades. It's like the city is sighing in metal. One bell, then two. Then a whole neighborhood joining in like a broken choir. This isn't mourning anymore. It's the soundtrack of collapse. You find yourself in the old chalk district, where scribes once practiced inscriptions and copied imperial edicts onto stone slabs. The chalk dust is gone now, washed away by the constant sweepings of makeshift burial crews. You see two men in faded tunics dragging a corpse wrapped in linen through an alley. They don't look at you. You don't look at them. Even the dogs avoid that street. You pass a former bathhouse that's been turned into a hospital. It used to echo with laughter and splashes. Now it's eerily quiet. The water basins are empty, the floors slick with wax and vinegar. People lie motionless on straw mats under a leaking fresco of Apollo. You step inside for a moment just to see. You wish you hadn't. A boy is praying aloud, repeating the same phrase. "Not my mother, not my mother, not my mother." His voice cracks on the final word. One of the caretakers, likely a nun or a very tired baker, waves a bundle of dried herbs in the air, muttering something about purifying the humors. She doesn't stop you from watching, but she doesn't acknowledge you either. You're just another shadow in a city full of ghosts. Historians still argue whether Constantinople truly reached a death toll of 5,000 a day, as Procopius claimed. Some say it's an exaggeration, that Byzantine chroniclers love drama. Others argue that given the size of the city and how fast it emptied, the number might have been too low. You follow one of the death carts as it makes its way toward the edge of town. It's a wooden platform pulled by two oxen, creaking like it might splinter at any moment. The driver wears a scarf over his mouth and mutters prayers with every bounce. People no longer wait for official notices. When someone dies, their neighbors drag the body out and leave it at the corner, sometimes with a candle, sometimes with a prayer scrawled on parchment, sometimes with nothing. The bodies aren't buried right away. There aren't enough gravediggers. You pass an open field that once served as a parade ground. Now it's a trench. One long, unmarked grave with rows of linen-wrapped figures. No names, no rituals, just layers of history being stacked like firewood. A woman kneels at the edge, whispering over a bundle in her arms. You want to comfort her. You want to say something profound and Roman-sounding. But you don't know Latin well enough, and honestly, there's no word for this in any language. The bureaucrats are overwhelmed. The census clerks stopped counting. The burial permits are meaningless now. A low-ranking prefect is reportedly scribbling death tolls onto old tax ledgers because there's no other paper left. You glance into an alley and see scrolls, actual imperial scrolls, being used to plug windows. The scribes are dead, or missing, or very drunk, and yet the city tries to function. A small group of clergy gather in the square to chant psalms, their voices raw. A street performer, desperate for coin, tries juggling in front of an empty tavern. The wine has turned to vinegar. The patrons have turned to dust. In one noble district, someone has scrawled graffiti on a marble archway. God sees. And he's annoyed. A bit of dark humor peeks through the misery. One rumor claims the city's cats have started forming their own religion. Another says the emperor's food taster now insists on smelling every fish twice before serving it. But mostly people stop talking. Silence grows like moss. You enter a small church tucked between two grain warehouses. Inside, the frescoes look half-melted in the candlelight. The priest is gone. In his place, an old woman hums a lullaby as she sweeps dust off the altar. It helps, she says, not looking up. Even if it doesn't. The city's rhythm is broken. Bells ring not for mass, not for weddings, not even for executions. They ring for the sheer need to mark the moment, like someone trying to hold back the tide with a metronome. And you feel it in your bones. This is a city that no longer knows what to do with its dead. A quirky detail lingers in your mind. Some households start placing painted masks on the deceased. Not for religious reasons, just so they can remember them with a face that isn't twisted in agony. The masks are made of wax and linen, painted hastily with charcoal. Some even smile. A few are left on doorsteps, with a note, "She was kind." You end up in the Forum Bovis, where the statue of Constantine looms like a bored god. Pigeons still perch on his shoulders, unbothered. You sit at the edge of a dried-up fountain, watching as the sun sets behind the spires and domes, staining everything in a deep amber that feels too beautiful for this day. You wonder what happens when there are no more to bury the dead, and no more to ring the bells. You suspect you'll find out soon. You find yourself wandering toward the old quarter where medicine once thrived, or at least gave the impression of trying. This is where doctors live, or used to. The brass signs are still nailed beside doorways. Healer to the prefect, physician of the court, practitioner of the humors. Impressive titles, less impressive results. You knock on one door, no answer. A second, just silence. By the third, someone finally responds. A man with wild hair and a bandaged hand opens it an inch and peers out. "Are you sick?" he asks. "Not yet," you whisper. He shrugs and lets you in. The house smells of herbs and old paper. Scrolls are stacked everywhere. Some medical, some philosophical, one oddly labeled "How to Remove Demons Using Boiled Leeks." You try not to judge. The physician, he doesn't give a name, offers you a seat on a cushion that's seen better centuries. "People think we know what's going on," he says. "We don't. We're guessing. All of us." You ask what they're trying. He lists the usual. Vinegar compresses, rose water, onion poultices, bloodletting, fasting, prayer. Then he adds casually, "We also tried goat urine. Fresh." You stare. "It didn't help," he confirms. Historians still argue whether Byzantine medicine was more effective than sheer luck. The empire inherited Greek and Roman traditions, added Christian mysticism, and occasionally mixed in Persian techniques. The result? A lot of scrolls, a lot of theories, not much success. You peek into his treatment room. A patient lies on a cot, covered in damp cloth and muttering in Coptic. Nearby, a tray of odd tools gleams in the low light, bronze scalpels, glass cups for suctioning, and what appears to be a hedgehog's spine. You don't ask. There's a chart on the wall labeled Biles and Winds. It's color-coded, very professional looking, completely useless. You thank the doctor and step back into the street, where you find more examples of medical creativity. One woman hangs garlic from every window. Another bathes daily in cold wine. A monk in the square claims to have cured 2 people by screaming psalms directly into their ears. Some people turn to relics, bits of saints' bones, scraps of holy tunics, even one suspiciously clean tooth said to belong to the Apostle Paul. You touch a relic offered by a passing pilgrim. It's warm, but that could be the sun. Or maybe Paul. Who knows? You make your way to a public bath that's still operating, sort of. A healer there insists steam can kill the bad vapors. You sit in the corner as naked men sweat in silence, staring into the mist like it might give them answers. One starts singing a hymn. Another breaks down crying halfway through. The bathhouse walls are covered in warnings. Don't touch your eyes. Boil your water. Drink only from the blessed spring. No one really follows them. You see a man lick his fingers after eating figs. 5 people gasp. You leave quickly. A quirky tidbit. A group of upper-class ladies has started hosting cleansing ceremonies involving lavender oil, harp music, and a minor ritual borrowed from a Persian fertility cult. Do they believe it works? Probably not, but it smells nice and passes the time. You pass a medical supply vendor shouting about his new miracle paste, made from crushed amber, owl feathers, and the dried skin of a sea cucumber. His assistant hands you a sample. You decide not to ask where the sea cucumber came from. By nightfall, the streets are lit with more candles than usual. Some are for the dead, but many are placed beside doorways as a kind of signal. Still alive here. Try again tomorrow. You find yourself at a makeshift clinic run by nuns. It's clean in the way a place with no medicine can be. They use vinegar cloths, willow bark tea, and lots of singing. One nun offers you a honey biscuit. It won't cure anything, she says, but you'll die a little happier. She smiles and moves on to bandage a young man's hand. He's shivering. You hope it's just from the cold. Historians still debate how much any of this helped. Some claim isolation slowed the spread. Others argue most measures were theater, a way to feel useful while the invisible enemy moved unchecked. The plague didn't care about charts or ointments or goat urine. It had a job and it was efficient. You pass by a tavern converted into an herbalist's lodge. People chant, drink spiced wine, and burn strange-smelling wood. One man clutches a chicken and insists it has prophetic dreams. The chicken looks unbothered. As you walk, the contrast hits you. In a world without antibiotics or germ theory, treatment becomes performance. It's theater of survival. And every act, no matter how absurd, is an act of hope. Even if it involves leeches, you end your day on a rooftop, staring out over the domes and minarets of Constantinople. The moon rises pale and indifferent. Below, someone is ringing a bell. Not a death bell this time, but a temple chime. For once, it sounds almost peaceful. You close your eyes and imagine a world where medicine is more than guesswork. But for now, guesswork will have to do. You head deeper into the palace compound again. Not because it's safe, but because it's fascinating. Somewhere behind its gilded doors and perfumed chambers, Theodora still breathes, still walks, still rules. Or co-rules. It's hard to say who's holding the reins at this point, but if you had to bet, your money's on her. The Empress doesn't flinch. Even now, with death scratching at the doors like a stray cat, Theodora maintains her poise. You catch a glimpse of her in a colonnade garden, dressed in violet silk with a veil drawn tight over her mouth. Her fingers glitter with rings, her spine is straight as a spear, and her expression could freeze boiling water. It's the same look she wore during the Nika riots. You remember those, don't you? The circus had turned into a civil war. Half the city burned, and Justinian was ready to flee. But Theodora? She stayed. Royalty is a fine burial shroud. she reportedly said. That's the kind of woman who doesn't blink, especially not at a germ. The palace staff is visibly thinner. Many have died. Many more have simply wandered off. But those who remain walk a tightrope of ritual, fear, and compulsive hand-washing. You pass a eunuch dusting a mosaic with a goose-feather fan, pausing to cough behind a brocade sleeve. An attendant carries a tray of water so carefully it might as well be lava. Everyone whispers. Everyone sweats. But no one disobeys Theodora. There's a reason for that. She has eyes everywhere. Chambermaids, scribes, even the occasional street urchin with good ears and a fast mouth. Theodora may not control the plague, but she controls the narrative. You hear her voice during a private address to the remaining court, a measured musical tone. Fear, she says, is the real contagion, and we have no room for two pandemics. Historians still argue whether Theodora's composure was political theater or genuine nerve. Some say she ruled with iron discipline wrapped in scented linen. Others whisper she prayed through the night, weeping behind her iconostasis. But no one denies her influence. You make your way into her private chapel, an intimate space filled with gold leaf, pale incense, and unsettling quiet. A fresco of the Virgin Mary dominates one wall. Her eyes unusually large, almost accusatory. You sit for a while trying to match Theodora's calm. You fail. Later, you wander into her writing room, surprisingly austere. No lavish furnishings, just a stone table, a worn cushion, and a bronze mirror slightly cracked at the edge. On the table is a stylus and a list. You're not supposed to read it, so of course you do. It's a list of names, dead advisors, dead allies, dead rivals, all carefully notated, all crossed out in the same neat hand. Below it, a single new name is freshly inked, but not yet crossed. Justinian. You wonder if he knows she's preparing for that possibility. In the adjoining hall, Theodora's remaining ladies-in-waiting gather under torchlight. They gossip with a strange kind of quiet joy, a survival instinct. They share plague rumors, symptom stories, and one truly absurd claim that bathing in basil-infused milk keeps the disease away. You'd smell like soup, one laughs. Another shrugs. Better soup than soil. A fringe detail emerges. Theodora's perfume master, yes, she is one, has begun crafting custom oils infused with saffron, myrrh, and clove to mask the scent of decay. Some claim it works better than prayer. Some just want to smell something other than vinegar. As you leave the inner chambers, you spot a curious scene. Theodora standing alone before a large mosaic of herself and Justinian. She studies it for a long moment, expression unreadable. Then, calmly, she turns and walks away. Later that evening, you overhear a group of soldiers discussing rumors from the outer provinces. They say Alexandria's half empty. One mutters, "They've shut the port." Another nods solemnly. Antioch too. The dead pile up like snowdrifts. No one mentions leaving. No one dares. Theodora would not approve. The palace's outer halls remain lit long after curfew. Candles flicker behind every curtain. Somewhere in the library, a monk copies medical notes from Galen's ancient texts. He's halfway through a sentence on bloodletting when he stops to scratch a rash on his neck. He doesn't notice. You do. You move toward the Empress's audience hall again, just in time to catch a rare address. She speaks without notes, without hesitation. "We are not the first to suffer," she says, "and we will not be the last. The empire endures not because we are spared, but because we endure anyway." It's the kind of speech that makes marble columns stand straighter. When it's over, you find yourself back in the colonnade, staring out at the city below. Fires flicker in the poorer districts. Bells still ring. The Tiberian gates stand open, though no one walks through them anymore. And yet, from this vantage point, Constantinople still looks majestic. Theodora walks past you silently, her veil fluttering in the breeze. You catch one last whiff of her perfume, sharp, floral, defiant. You get the feeling that if death came to knock, she'd open the door herself. The sun rises heavy and orange over a quieter city. The air has that strange, sour stillness again. Like everything is waiting, but no one knows for what. You walk the sloping streets toward the old necropolis on the edge of town, where the graves are filling faster than the ink on death scrolls can dry. Except now, they're not even using scrolls. Mass graves have become the new normal. They dig where there's space. Gardens, dried-out fountains, old courtyards, wherever the soil yields. And if it doesn't, they stack the dead in mausoleums like badly sorted laundry. You approach one of the newer burial sites, once the location of a merchant villa. It's now a pit, wide and raw, with a handful of exhausted men in tunics lifting bundles of cloth and laying them down without ceremony. You notice the linens are not tied shut. The bodies are stiff, arms half-raised or curled like they were still trying to fight the fever when it took them. A priest mutters a prayer with glazed eyes, barely audible over the clang of shovels. He doesn't even finish before the next cart arrives. They're using marble now, not for decoration but for sealing graves. Statues are broken into slabs to cover the pits. You see Athena's face lying sideways in the dirt, her stone eyes staring upward with ancient indifference. You make your way down the Via Ignatia, past rows of upper-class homes sealed tight with wax-covered cloths. The residents are either dead, gone, or pretending to be both. A house you passed yesterday with laughter spilling from the windows is now eerily silent. A single sandal lies at the gate. A street sweeper passes you, pushing ash and wilted flowers. She pauses, wipes her brow, and offers a strange smile. "Still cleaner than the Forum," she says and moves on. A quirky detail. In the absence of proper cemeteries, people start burying loved ones beneath the floors of their own homes. Bedrooms become crypts. Kitchens become tombs. In one quarter, it becomes customary to sleep beside the recently dead for one night before burial. To show them you're not afraid. You are, of course. But traditions start somewhere. You find your way to a garden near the Church of the Holy Apostles, where a group of monks is planting olive trees among the graves. One explains that it's an act of hope. Another shrugs and says it keeps people from digging them back up. In this quiet space, birds return. You hear the faint flutter of wings above, and for a moment you remember what silence used to mean. Not dread, just silence. Historians still argue whether the worst had passed by the end of the first year. Procopius insists it dragged on for months without pause. Later scholars suggest waves, surges followed by lulls, like the tide. But for those burying their loved ones, timelines don't matter. The plague is either at your door, or it's at your neighbor's, and eventually everyone lives next to someone. You cross into a district known for its stonemasonry workshops. The chisels are still ringing. Stone still needs carving. Only now it's mostly names. A young boy stands beside a newly finished slab, reading aloud, "Julia, beloved mother, fed the pigeons." That's it. That's her epitaph. Strangely perfect. As the days stretch on, graveyards grow lopsided. Without skilled labor, they become crooked, uneven, chaotic. Graves marked with whatever's available. Planks, painted tiles, broken bowls turned upside down. You spot one marked with a child's wooden toy, carefully balanced atop a clay urn. And still people visit. They kneel beside mounds of dirt with quiet prayers, or whispered stories, or offerings of figs and bread. One woman sits cross-legged beside a grave, sewing. "He liked the sound of it," she explains. "It calms him. Calms you too." Somewhere near the imperial palace, a private mausoleum has run out of space. They start stacking the bodies in layers, separated by lime and cloth. No inscriptions, no icons, just generations reduced to strata. And yet, people still try to remember. A fringe behavior begins to emerge. Grief tattoos, a symbol inked into the wrist or shoulder to mark who you've lost. A rose for a daughter, a crescent moon for a brother, a feather for a friend. The practice spreads quickly, perhaps because pain you choose feels more manageable than the kind that sneaks up on you in the night. You make your way back toward the seawall, where salt air cuts through the stench of the city. You pause by a memorial bench, formerly a marble garden seat, now etched with the words, "They were here. That is enough." You sit. Across the harbor, The fires have dimmed, but not gone out. Death doesn't need flames. It just waits, silently, patiently, with all the time in the world. And yet, there's something quietly defiant in the way people keep showing up. Keep praying. Keep planting olive trees. As if by carving names, baking bread, or tattooing grief into skin, they're telling the plague, "We see you, but you won't erase us." Not all at once. As you leave the graveyard, you spot a child playing with a stick in the dirt, tracing spirals and stars. She waves at you. You wave back, because what else can you do? You decide to follow the water. Not the fountains, they've mostly run dry. Not the baths, too risky now. You head for the harbors, where the great arteries of trade once throbbed with life. The Sea of Marmara stretches out before you like glass, reflecting a sky that's too clear, too bright. It feels rude, almost, to have such beautiful weather while the world unravels. The harbors are quieter now, but not dead. Not yet. A few ships still rock against the docks. Merchant vessels, mostly half unloaded or abandoned entirely. Their crews, scattered, missing, or already under dirt. You notice several have sails tied with ropes that bear faint, reddish stains. You don't ask. You find a fisherman repairing nets with methodical, trembling hands. "They say it came by sea," he mutters, not looking up. "So now the sea is cursed." He spits, for emphasis, into the waves. The docks, once full of shouting, wheeling carts, the smells of spices and goats and wine-soaked cargo, are now half empty. The air smells of tar, salt, and a vinegar. Someone's idea of disinfection, apparently. You pass barrels labeled purifying oil, and ropes dyed black. Signs of mourning, or maybe just superstition. Historians still debate how trade contributed to the spread. Was it the grain routes? The silk convoys from the east? The Red Sea smugglers? Everyone agrees on one thing. Constantinople's wealth was also its vulnerability. You open yourself to the world, and sometimes the world bites back. You follow the shore to the old lighthouse. From its high perch, you can see the outlines of distant provinces. Dots across the water where life once bustled. Now they're quiet too. Alexandria, Antioch, Ephesus. The plague rides ships like a patient stowaway, waiting. A priest stands near the edge, arms raised. He's not praying, he's shouting, "Return! O Lord, return!" His voice cracks in the wind. No one stops him. No one mocks him. He's been doing this every evening for a week. A quirky tidbit. Some sailors have started hanging amulets from their riggings. Charms made from coral, old coins, dried figs, even bones. One ship hoists a black sail not in mourning, but in the hope that death, seeing it already claimed, might move on. You pause by a tavern near the harbor wall. Its door open, music drifting out softly. Someone inside is plucking a lyre, playing a tune that feels older than the empire itself. You don't recognize the song, but it moves something in your ribs. Inside, 5 people sit, spaced far apart. No one speaks. They just sip watered wine and listen. You sit too. For a while, you forget the smell of the city, the ringing bells, the shallow graves. It's just music and the sound of the sea below. For one fleeting moment, it's peace. When the song ends, you nod to the musician. He nods back. That's enough. You walk out into the salty breeze again and find yourself by the Imperial Arsenal. Once a hive of hammering, sawing, building. Now it's locked down. Ships unfinished. Tools scattered. The guards stand stiffly, masked in linen and clearly terrified. No one wants to be assigned here, where every timber might carry the breath of another dying port. Near the arsenal, a scribe posts a new edict on the wall. All vessels arriving from Egypt must remain offshore for 10 days. It's written in bold, angular script, but already peeling in the heat. 10 days. You chuckle bitterly. Takes 10 hours for the fleas to jump ship. You find a group of merchants arguing at the customs house. One demands entry for his spices: cinnamon, cardamom, ginger. People still need comfort, he insists. Suffering doesn't stop hunger. Another replies, Suffering is hunger now. They glare at each other, and for a second you think fists will fly. But then both turn, walk away. There's no point in fighting when half your customers are already buried. You wander through a warehouse with cracked walls and sagging beams. Inside are crates marked in Greek, Latin, Coptic, even Syriac. This is the map of an empire, stored in wooden boxes. You lift the lid of one and find bolts of silk, untouched. Another holds frankincense, still fragrant despite the rot. You breathe it in. It almost smells holy. You leave the warehouse and stand at the shoreline. The tide rolls in gently, whispering secrets against the stone. You remember the old tales, how cities were born from the sea, how Poseidon watched over harbors, how sea foam birthed beauty. Not today. Today the sea has become a highway for invisible enemies. And yet, you spot a child on the beach building towers out of wet sand. She stacks them carefully, one on top of the other, then gently carves a doorway into the tallest one. You ask her what she's making. A house, she says. For who? She shrugs. For when they come back. She doesn't say who they are. You don't ask. You sit beside her for a while, just watching the waves. The wind picks up. A gull screeches overhead. Far across the water, a ship cuts through the bay. It sails full, heading west. It's unclear if it brings goods or ghosts. You don't wait to find out. You wake to the sound of arguing priests. It's early morning, but the sun already hits the domes with that unforgiving golden flare. You're near the Hagia Sophia, and the square outside is swarming. Not with merchants or pilgrims like before, but with clergy, monks, and a surprising number of very tired scribes. A council is forming, or trying to. Apparently, someone's decided that the church should have an official explanation for the plague. A divine reason, something quotable, something they can pin on a fresco. You sit on the edge of a dry fountain and listen. One monk insists it's God's punishment for heresy. The Arians, he spits, their doctrines are infectious. Another blames moral decay, too many actors, too many women speaking in public. A third claims it's a test of faith. Like Job, he says, we suffer, we endure, we prove worthy. Then someone mutters, maybe God's just tired of us. No one laughs. You wander into the basilica, slipping through a side door half hidden by scaffolding. Even now, construction continues, sort of. The interior smells of stone, dust, incense, and wet wood. A few artisans hammer listlessly at mosaic tiles, as if the pattern might hold off death a little longer. Historians still argue whether the church's presence helped or hindered the response. Some records say bishops organized food for the poor, medicine for the sick. Others describe monasteries sealing themselves off entirely, letting the city rot outside their walls. As always, it depends on the bishop and the plague's mood that week. You make your way to the nave. Sunlight filters through the windows in long, slanted bars, cutting the gloom like God's own searchlight. A woman kneels beneath the dome, head bowed, lips moving. Her prayers are so soft you can barely hear them. You don't interrupt. You climb the staircase behind the choir, normally off-limits. No one stops you. From the upper gallery, the city spreads out beneath the arches. Marble, rooftops, domes, smoke. It's beautiful and broken at once, like a hymn sung off-key. Down below, someone begins a chant. The sound echoes, bouncing off stone and gold, filling the space with something almost like hope. Then a scream cuts through it. You rush down. It's a pilgrim, gaunt, fevered, clutching his side. He collapses at the altar, eyes wide and glassy. No one moves to help. They just watch as a priest steps forward with a cloth and covers the man's face. The chant resumes louder this time. It's all theater, but theater matters. A fringe practice is gaining popularity now. Processions through the streets, barefoot, hooded, whipping themselves with reeds as they chant repentance songs. We are dust, they cry. We are ash. Some carry crosses. Some carry bones. One carries a cage with a single stunned dove inside. You pass a street shrine plastered with offerings. Coins, bread, beads, old love letters. Someone's left a doll made of corn husks. Another left a note that reads, "Please, not my brother. Take me instead. You linger longer than you should." A quirky tale. Rumors swirl that the bones of Saint Euphemia weep on certain nights, dripping oil that smells like cinnamon and cloves. People queue up to touch the casket, even though touching anything right now feels like inviting death for tea. You continue through the city, where churches are popping up like mushrooms. Not new buildings, just rooms repurposed. Courtyards, bakeries, even bathhouses become holy spaces. Once someone hangs an icon and lights a lamp, miracles are in high demand. Explanations, too. One priest shouts from a cart near the Misi, "This is the cleansing of the empire. Only the pure shall remain." Another, gentler, hands out small scraps of scripture wrapped around sprigs of thyme. You take one. It reads, "Even the sparrow finds a home." You don't believe it exactly, but you keep it anyway. Inside one small chapel, a nun paints icons late into the night. Her fingers are smudged with ochre and lapis, her brush trembling as she outlines the halo of a saint. You ask why she still paints. "To remind God we're still here," she says. Some monasteries become shelters. Others close their gates and pretend no one's knocking. The contrast is jarring. In one quarter, monks walk through the streets with bread baskets and lavender-soaked cloths. In another, the abbey bell rings to mark each hour, but no one comes outside. You hear whispers of a holy man living on a rooftop, refusing to descend until the plague ends. They say he sleeps beside birds, survives on rainwater and figs, and spends his days shouting psalms at clouds. You climb the nearby tower and see him across the rooftops, seated calmly beside a weathered cushion and a bowl of fruit. He sees you, nods, and returns to staring at the sky. That night, you return to the Hagia Sophia. The doors are open. The air is cooler. Dozens gather by candlelight. Not a service, not quite. Just presence. Some pray. Some sit in silence. Some cry into their sleeves. No sermons. Just light and breath and waiting. The wind carries the scent of wax and old cedar. You sit on the stone floor, back against a pillar, and watch the candles flicker like fireflies caught in a jar. You realize the church is not just a place now. It's a rhythm, a language, a holding pattern between grief and recovery. No one knows when this ends. But for now, faith, real or borrowed, is something to hold in shaking hands. You wake with your back sore from stone and your thoughts stuck between dreams and dread. The Hagia Sophia is emptier now, only a few scattered sleepers still curled near columns and stairwells. A monk passes by, humming something soft in Greek. You don't understand the words, but the melody feels like a blanket. Time feels strange in a city shaped by death. Days blur, bells ring without reason, and the sun seems to rise and fall without ever really changing the sky. You leave the church and drift through a quiet street, where someone's hung a wooden sign. "Do not knock. We are already gone." No one has taken it down. You decide to follow the food or what's left of it. In Constantinople, food has always been a statement. The empire was fed by grain ships from Egypt, wine from Syria, fish from the Bosphorus. But now, most of the bakeries are closed. Markets operate in hushed tones. And salt, once so abundant it glittered on tabletops, is hoarded like gold. At a street corner, a woman stirs something in a pot over a fire. You ask what it is. She smiles vaguely and says, "Whatever still lives." You don't push for details. Historians still debate how the food supply endured during the worst months. Some argue the bureaucracy, though weakened, managed to maintain distribution. Others point to private efforts. Nuns growing gardens, noble houses baking for the masses, children catching pigeons with quiet skill and a little leftover grain. You pass a noble villa turned soup kitchen. The old marble statues have been stripped of jewels, offered up to pay for flour. A boy hands out bread with a cracked crust and a faint honey scent. You thank him. He shrugs. Better if you're not picky. In the vegetable quarter, rooftop gardens have become precious real estate. You see someone watering cabbage with bathwater. Another uses wine. You're not sure if it's genius or madness, but the plants look deeply relaxed. A fringe habit is emerging, food prayers. Not before meals, during. Whispered as you chew. Words like, "Thank you for not killing me," figure, or "If this onion is holy, may it bless my gut." One man says a full psalm while eating an egg. By the time he finishes, it's cold. You visit the old grain silos. They're guarded now, not by soldiers, but by volunteers with clubs and sunburns. They don't speak unless you speak first. You ask if there's enough left. Enough for someone, one says. Not sure who. You continue through the city and stumble across an improvised market. It's quiet, spread thin across the plaza like it's embarrassed to still exist. A few fish on trays, some bruised figs, a very suspicious cheese wheel that seems to be sweating. Prices are scribbled on bits of tile. Coins aren't always accepted. Some vendors prefer favors, or prayers, or secrets. You give away the candle you've been carrying since Section 4. In return, you get 2 eggs. One is cracked. You still call it a win. Later, you follow your nose to an alley where someone's roasting meat. Real meat. You get closer and realize it's pigeon. Possibly 2. It smells like triumph. You don't ask to share. You just sit and watch the smoke curl upward like a prayer with no address. You notice how the city's relationship with food has changed. It's no longer indulgent, no longer performance. It's become survival, quiet and small. People eat without talking, chew like it's a secret. Even hunger has lost its drama. It's just there under the skin next to everything else. You visit a monk who's been recording food customs during the plague. He calls it his culinary confession. He tells you, "I've seen a man cry over lentils. I've seen a woman bake bread she wouldn't eat, only wanted to smell it. I saw a boy trade a gold coin for an olive pit." You ask why he's writing it all down. Because food is the last proof we were human. He hands you a small square of parchment, drawn with careful lines. A recipe for flatbread, written like scripture. You tuck it away, unsure why it makes your throat tighten. A quirky fact: some Byzantine kitchens begin adding bitter herbs to meals, not for flavor, but to trick death. One cook tells you, "If it tastes terrible, maybe he won't want me." You can't argue with the logic. As evening approaches, you pass a public fountain where a few people wash figs in wine, then share them without speaking. You're handed one without being asked. You nod. You bite. It's overripe and sweet and sticky, and for just a second, it fills your mouth with something like joy. You sit with strangers on the fountain's edge. You don't exchange names. You just watch the sun set behind the minarets and domes and rooftops, painting everything gold and pink and impossibly soft. And in this quiet, shared stillness, you realize something odd. The plague hasn't stolen your appetite. It's made you more careful with it, more reverent, more aware that each bite is a small act of resistance against forgetting how to be alive. Night drapes itself over the city like a heavy velvet cloak, smothering the sharp corners and dulling the sounds. Constantinople after dark used to hum with energy. Markets closing late, taverns spilling song into the alleys, philosophers debating under torchlight. But now, the streets feel like a stage after the play has ended. Props abandoned, audience gone. Only the wind left to whisper. You slip through the shadows, drawn toward the firelight flickering near the hippodrome. Yes, that hippodrome. It once roared with chariot races, filled with banners, gamblers, chants, and dust-choked glory. Now it's just dust. The stone seats are cracked. The spina, the central barrier once lined with statues and obelisks, sits silent beneath a sky of blinking stars. But people are gathering here again in 2s and 3s. Not for racing, for memory. Someone has lit a fire in a brazier near the old imperial box. They pass a jug of watered wine and take turns telling stories. Soft, meandering, sometimes inaccurate, always heartfelt. A man describes the last Blues versus Greens final before the outbreak, claiming his cousin's cousin saw the winning chariot snap in half right at the finish line. A woman laughs and corrects him. It was the driver who snapped, not the chariot. They both laugh too hard. It's not really about the facts. Historians still argue about the role of the hippodrome in Justinian's time. Was it just sport or subtle politics? A pressure valve for the city's rage? The truth is, it was both. And in this strange, liminal moment, it's become something else entirely. A space for remembering what it felt like to be a city. You sit in the stands where emperors once watched the crowd surge and roar. Now, the only roar is the occasional dog barking at nothing. And maybe your stomach, still unimpressed by yesterday's fig. Someone sings a low, old tune about the sea and the stars and a lover who never came home. It's out of tune, slightly slurred, but it echoes beautifully in the hollow bones of the hippodrome. A fringe tradition emerges here, memory nights. No priests, no rituals, just stories around flames. People come to remember the living, not with tears, but with laughter, trivia, gossip. He loved fish stew so much he named his dog Sardine. She once made a senator cry just by complimenting his handwriting. They danced barefoot in the snow and didn't get sick. Then, not then. You wonder why this helps. And then it hits you, memory is armor. You wrap the dead in stories to protect them from being erased. Nearby, a boy carves something into the stone of a column. You look closer, it's a name. Nothing fancy, just a name and a date. You nod in approval. It won't last forever, but neither did marble statues. You wander toward the palace quarter again, where bonfires flicker in some courtyards while others remain cold and dark. The contrasts in this city are endless. Opulence next to rot, feasts next to famine, marble next to mud, and now memory next to forgetting. A quirky moment catches you off guard. A group of children chase each other near the aqueduct of Valens, playing a game that involves throwing dried fig stems into bowls. One yells, "I win! You owe me a prayer." You smile. Grief hasn't reached their knees yet. Farther north, a traveling actor performs alone on a makeshift stage. His audience a handful of weary souls and two very interested cats. He reenacts a scene from a well-known comedy about an emperor who can't stop hiccuping during trials. No one laughs loudly, but no one walks away either. You pass through the square where the column of Constantine still stands, wrapped now in strips of cloth tied by those praying for protection. Red, blue, green, each a silent cry upward. A woman ties on a yellow ribbon, then kisses the stone. You don't ask what she's asking for. You reach the edge of the Grand Bazaar, shuttered, silent, its labyrinthine lanes choked with dust and time. You peer inside a shop window. Jewelry still glitters behind dirty glass. A crown of gold filigree sits forgotten atop a mannequin head missing one eye. You wonder if the shopkeeper is still alive, if anyone will ever unlock the doors again, if crowns still matter in a city without crowds. Historians will one day look back and wonder how Byzantines coped, what they did in the evenings, how they softened the fear, and somewhere in a forgotten archive, they might find a note. In the weeks after the Great Dying began, people gathered around fires and told stories about the lives they missed. That might be enough. That night, you curl up on a rooftop, blanket over your shoulders, listening to the city breathe, or maybe wheeze, but still it breathes. A soft melody drifts from a nearby home, a lullaby. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm is unmistakable. It's the sound of someone trying to soothe someone else. You close your eyes. For once, sleep comes easily, because tonight you remembered someone, and they remembered you. You wake at dawn to the sound of sandals on rooftop tiles. Someone's walking nearby, slow, steady steps, as if they've forgotten the ground even exists. You peek over the edge. It's a woman with a basket of dried herbs on her hip, humming a tune that drifts over the terracotta like a breeze. She plucks a few sprigs of rosemary from a rooftop planter and moves on without noticing you. The city is waking too, not all at once, not like before, but in pieces like an orchestra tuning after a long silence. A shutter opens here. A broom swishes there. A few cautious birds argue about something in a fig tree. You head down to the forum, curious to see what a city does with itself after everything has fallen apart. You find something unexpected. A painter. He's seated cross-legged in the middle of the plaza, a slab of wood balanced on his knees, a handful of crushed minerals at his feet. Ochre, charcoal, bits of malachite. He dips a brush into egg yolk and starts outlining the arches of the nearby basilica. Not as it looks now, but as it used to. Whole, gleaming. You ask him why. To remember where we are, he replies. So we don't forget who we were. Feels profound. Then he sneezes directly into his elbow and mutters. Also, my landlord kicked me out, so here I am. A fringe detail. Artists are becoming chroniclers now. Mosaics show not saints, but scenes from plague life. Monks administering vinegar cloths, midwives comforting the fevered, and once, shockingly, a man relieving himself into a vase while giving side-eye to a crow. Art becomes honesty, even when it's ugly. You pass a blacksmith who's no longer making armor. He's making bells. Someone has to mark time, he says. Otherwise, it just becomes soup. That's how he says it. Soup. A bell rings in the distance. Not a church bell, too light. It's from a new memory tower in the artisan quarter. A scaffolding platform wrapped in copper, built solely to house a single, clear chime. People drop in scraps of bronze, old spoons, melted trinkets, just to keep it ringing. One clang per hour. Strange how comforting it is. You visit the old university, now half abandoned. The lecture halls echo with forgotten syllables. But in the courtyard, a group of scribes has set up long benches and laid out scrolls. They're copying everything they can. Not scripture this time, not politics, but stories, folktales, jokes, recipes, love letters. One man holds up a sheet and reads aloud. My dearest, your absence wounds me like a dull spoon. Also, your goat is here. Historians still debate whether this copying frenzy was organized or spontaneous. Some claim Justinian himself ordered the preservation of culture. Others think it just happened. People reaching for permanence. A kind of cultural sandbagging against the rising tide. You come across a woman weaving a tapestry on her balcony. It stretches down almost to the street, filled with wild, tangled shapes and long lines of red thread. She tells you it's a map. Of where? You ask. Of here. Of this. Of now. She replies. You can't see any streets or names or directions. Just curves and chaos. It makes perfect sense. In another neighborhood, someone has started a lending wall. A series of small shelves cut into an old brick house where people leave and take what they need. Soap, cloth, bread, stories. There's a small sign that reads, if you take a candle, leave a dream. You leave behind the flatbread recipe. In the forum again, a speaker recites fragments of old laws. People heckle lightly, but it's affectionate. It feels more like theater than governance. Then someone calls out, what's the law on stealing figs if they fall by accident? Another answers, if you can catch them before the rats, they're yours. Laughter. Real laughter. Not wild or hysterical. Just the sound of lungs remembering their better use. A quirky tidbit. A school has reopened under a portico with no walls. The children write on broken tiles using bits of charcoal. Their teacher teaches them philosophy, grammar, and, unexpectedly, hygiene. She makes them chant, boil the water or regret your choices. They chant it proudly. They're the future, after all. Or at least what's left of it. You stop by a stall offering ink and small parchment slips. A sign reads, write what you wish had survived. You watch as people scribble things. My mother's laughter. The smell of the mint seller's cart. How it felt to hold hands in a crowd without fear. You write something, too. Then you move on. By late afternoon, the city buzzes. Not like before. Not like a feast day or coronation, but like a hive slowly remembering how to hum. At a small plaza near the Theodosian walls, a man begins sweeping for no reason. He whistles. No one joins him, but no one stops him either. You take one last look from a tower overlooking the Misi. You can see that Constantinople is not whole, not healed, but it is moving. And for the first time in a long time, not just toward the grave. You step down from the tower just as the wind shifts. It smells different. Not like rot or dust or vinegar-soaked linen, but like spring, or something pretending to be spring. There's a crispness to it, the kind that makes you breathe a little deeper, just to check if your lungs still work. They do. You wander down a narrow street in the southern quarter, where ivy is starting to reclaim the cracks between the stones. It creeps silently up walls, over forgotten doorways, towards sunlight and sky. Nature, it seems, doesn't care much for imperial schedules. A boy crouches near a puddle, trying to catch a frog with a spoon. You ask him why. To sell it, he says. To who? He shrugs. Someone. Makes sense. Nearby, a baker is hauling a loaf from a makeshift clay oven. Not inside a shop, those are still mostly shuttered, but in the courtyard of what used to be a coin mint. Now it's full of bread, laughter, and what might be poetry. A scroll nailed to the door reads, "Yeast before wealth." You applaud internally. You follow your nose to a woman boiling herbs on a brazier, lavender, sage, something sharper. She's making balm. For joints, she explains. For breathing. For grief. Grief needs balm now. She smears a little onto your temples. The coolness spreads behind your eyes. She says nothing, just nods like she's done something important. She has. You keep walking. At the old school of rhetoric, benches have returned to the courtyard. Not just for students, though there are a few, but for debates. Public ones. One orator shouts that the empire must strengthen its borders. Another replies that maybe, just maybe, borders don't stop fleas. You can't argue with that logic. Neither can the fleas. A quirky development. Some people now wear charms not just against the plague, but against forgetting. Tiny satchels filled with scraps of letters, hair from loved ones, bits of broken jewelry. One man wears a single dice from a tavern game around his neck. My friend beat me with this, just once. Then he died. Memory as armor. Again, you walk through a neighborhood near the seawalls where murals are blooming. Bright colors. Reds, blues, golds, spreading across formerly bare walls. Not saints, not emperors, just people. A mother brushing her daughter's hair. A merchant offering fruit. A man sleeping in the shade. One shows a figure with wings, face hidden, offering both a cup and a knife. You pause before it for a long time. A group of children runs past, their sandals slapping against stone. They shout something in unison. An improvised rhyme about fleas and figs and running faster than the gods. You wonder if it'll be remembered centuries from now as deep folklore. Probably not, but you'll remember it. At the harbor, ships are returning. Not many, not often, but enough to change the shape of the skyline. Sailors bring not just goods, but news. Ephesus is quiet. Antioch is stirring. Alexandria, still uncertain. Historians will later disagree on the timeline of recovery. Some say the empire rebounded with surprising speed. Others insist the damage lasted decades. But if you ask the people here, they'll tell you recovery isn't a line. It's a slow, uneven ripple. Some neighborhoods buzz while others still whisper. You pass a courtyard where a wedding is taking place. Small. No choir, no trumpets. Just two people, barefoot, hand in hand beneath an old olive tree. Their vows are simple. I will not leave your side, even in plague, and I will share my bread. There's no feast, just a bowl of grapes. You're offered one. You take it, and it's sweet in a way that nearly breaks your heart. Farther along, a scholar recites poetry from a balcony. He has a loud voice and a long beard and a bowl of wine that's definitely not for sharing. You hear this line float down. When the city wept, we sang until our throats gave out, just to prove we still had breath. You remember it. You say it back to yourself under your breath. In the afternoon, the baths reopen. Not officially and not cleanly, but there's warm water and steam and the scent of crushed mint. You strip and sink into a pool carved from old marble, surrounded by strangers. No one speaks, and yet it feels like a ritual. When you leave, someone offers you a towel. You dry off. You keep walking. In the forum, someone's building a sundial, not a fancy one, just a stone circle and a stick. But it draws a small crowd. They wait for the shadow to move, then cheer when it does. Time is a little less frightening when you can see it. At day's end, you walk the upper wall of the city. The view stretches all the way to the sea, where sails dot the horizon like hopeful punctuation. You spot a painter again, maybe the same one from before, now sketching the skyline. This time, he's added people. Dozens of tiny figures walking, talking, carrying baskets, feeding birds. "I think it's starting to come back," he says. "What is?" "Us." You don't say anything. You just stand beside him and watch as the last light dips below the dome of Hagia Sophia, casting long shadows that don't feel quite as heavy anymore. The sun rises with a certain confidence today. It climbs past the rooftops as if it's reclaiming territory from the shadows, as though it remembers its job again. You stretch beneath a fig tree near the city walls, your back stiff, your thoughts still blurry. There's music drifting from somewhere. Pipes, maybe a lyre, something light. You walk toward it without thinking. The music comes from a gathering near the palace of the Porphyrogenitus, where musicians have assembled with instruments patched together from whatever survived. Drums with cracked skins, flutes chipped at the mouth, a kithara missing a string that no one seems to notice. They aren't performing. They're just playing half for themselves, half for the city. You sit near the edge, next to a woman spinning thread. "It's good," she says without looking up. They're playing as if they expect someone to dance. She's right. 2 children do, barefoot, arms flailing without rhythm. Then a third joins. Then someone claps. A man taps a stick against a broken tile. For a moment, it's almost a festival. If quieter, gentler, and held under a sky that still seems unsure if it wants to rain or not. Historians will later call this the lull. A strange season after the worst had passed, but before the empire truly recovered. A time of cautious joy, of breath held just below the surface. A moment when hope didn't roar, it whispered. You head toward the imperial quarter. The outer gardens are growing wild. Roses climbing over statues. Mint overtaking the walkways. You pass an old gardener trimming a hedge with a kitchen knife. He sees you, shrugs, and says, "I don't ask where the shears went. I'm just glad the roses stayed." Inside the palace walls, repairs have begun. Slow, methodical. Marble slabs laid carefully over cracked walkways. Mosaic tiles sorted like coins. It's not about restoring glory, at least not yet. It's about proving the palace still has a pulse. You find a servant repainting the border of a faded fresco. She doesn't speak, but she keeps working with the focus of someone brushing a god's eyelid. In the hall of Justinian, you see something strange. People laughing. Not loudly, not mockingly. Just a shared chuckle between 3 scribes trying to copy a letter with truly abysmal penmanship. One says, "This could be a list of saints or recipes for soup. I vote soup." The others nod solemnly. You sit nearby and listen. It's strange, this place. The center of power. The core of decisions. And yet, at the moment, it feels like a library that forgot it used to be a throne. You visit the Empress's garden, now mostly nettles and marigolds. But the bench is still there, and someone has set a bowl of fresh water beside it. A gift, maybe, or a ritual, or just a kindness to birds. You sit. You remember. You remember what the city was before. The layered noise, the perfumed streets, the proud chaos of too many languages spoken at once. You remember the bells and the market barks and the splash of oars on the Golden Horn. You remember the fog that crept in from the sea, how it blurred the edges of the domes at dusk. And then you remember the silence, how it came so suddenly, how it wasn't empty but too full, of dread, of breath held, of footsteps too loud, of time dragging its heels through the alleys. A quirky fact comes to mind. During the plague's height, some people whispered that if you held your breath as you passed a corpse, death couldn't follow you. Children turned it into a game. Adults turned it into religion. You don't know if anyone still believes it, but you notice you're holding your breath again. You exhale, and then something remarkable happens. A procession, not of priests, not mourners, just people clean-faced, upright, solemn but not sad. They walk through the main avenue carrying tools, brushes, ledgers, books, seeds. One woman holds a basket of plums. A man wears a tunic freshly stitched. They're not performing. They're showing the city what it still has. A baker's guild joins in, each carrying a loaf. A trio of weavers follows, displaying dyed cloth like flags. Children bring birds in cages, opening the doors at the forum and letting them fly. No words, just movement, just presence. You join them. You walk past mosaics faded but not forgotten. Past statues missing limbs but standing tall. Past walls that once heard screams, now echoing the sound of sandals and breath and the low shuffle of 100 lives not ready to stop walking. You reach the harbor. The procession pauses. Someone kneels and pours wine into the sea. Not in mourning, in thanks. A priest nearby nods and mutters, "We're still here." Then again, louder, "We're still here," catches on. A few more voices. A chant? Not quite. Just confirmation. You stand there for a long time, watching the sun paint gold on water, watching ships bob like promises, watching gulls circle and cry, as if the city was never sick at all. The next morning you wake before the light. The city is still. Not silent, but still, like it's holding a breath just long enough for the day to arrive fully. You sit at the edge of a terrace overlooking the Golden Horn, your hands curled around a cup of barley tea, the steam ribboning into the cool air. You hear distant church bells, slow and deliberate, ringing in a pattern you don't quite recognize. Maybe a new one, maybe the old one softened. You walk again, without a plan, just letting your feet follow what feels warm. The streets are cleaner now. Not perfect. There are still alley corners with dark stains, and broken cart wheels leaning like drunks, but someone's sweeping. Someone's patching walls. Someone's replacing a shutter with blue-painted wood. You pass a group of masons rebuilding an arch near the old Senate. They joke as they lift stone, call each other grand titles. My Lord of Mortar, Duke of Dust, and share flatbread wrapped in linen. They see you, offer you a corner of their meal. You chew and listen as a man hums a working tune that's half prayer, half sea shanty. Further on, a school has fully reopened. Children chant their vowels under a shaded awning while a teacher taps out the beat with a stick. A girl raises her hand and asks, "What's the word for when the sun touches everything at once?" The teacher pauses, then smiles. "That's called light." And they all repeat it, light, light, light. You smile too. You pass a scriptorium where scribes are working by the light of oil lamps. Not just copying anymore, composing. You sneak a glance at a page. It's a poem. We ate with ghosts for months. Now we toast the living and let the wine spill. Historians still argue whether the empire truly recovered from the plague of Justinian. Some say the population never returned to its full strength. Others claim it laid the groundwork for future resilience. New systems, stronger faith, a changed world. But in this moment, standing in the heart of Constantinople, the debate feels far away. What you see is a city that stopped collapsing and started rearranging. The Empress's garden is in full bloom again. Not neat or formal. It looks wild, a little chaotic, full of bees and buzzing life. People bring books to read on its benches. One elderly man sits quietly with a cat in his lap and his eyes closed. You don't disturb him. At the bathhouse, laughter echoes again. Not forced, not theatrical. Real, belly-deep laughter. A boy tries to float on his back and sinks like a stone. His father claps slowly and shouts, "You almost didn't drown." Everyone cheers. You walk toward the palace again, not for any grand reason. Just curiosity. The outer walls are being whitewashed. Slowly, carefully. It's the kind of work that will take months. Years even. But it's begun. Inside the reception hall, you see a court official dusting off a throne. He notices you and grins. We're still pretending people need this. He doesn't sit on it. He just brushes the cushion and moves on. In a quiet corner of the palace, a seamstress embroiders new robes. Gold thread, rich crimson fabric. Not for vanity, for ritual, for the idea that ceremony still matters, even if it's just you and a bird watching. A quirky scene. Someone is teaching pigeons to bow. Yes, really. Near the hippodrome, a young man throws grain and taps a stick 3 times. The pigeons respond with varying degrees of enthusiasm. I'm training them for funerals, he says. And weddings. Mostly weddings now. You nod. You offer a 4th tap. 1 pigeon bows. Feels like a blessing. By late afternoon, the streets swell again. Not crowded, but comfortable. You pass vendors selling citrus and soft cheese. 1 woman is carving wooden spoons, humming to herself. Another sets up a table of herbs labeled not with names, but feelings. Hope, calm, sleep, begin again. You take a satchel labeled begin again. You don't ask what's inside. The sun begins its descent, painting the domes in shades of brass and flame. You return to the seawall one last time just to look. The ships are steady now. The gulls quieter. The sky impossibly wide. You breathe it all in. The scent of olives, the rustle of linen, the weight of a city remembering how to live. Then you sit down, and you listen. So here you are, back where we began. The city is quieter now, soft, breathing, whole in its brokenness. The light has faded into that deep, velvet blue that seems to hush the rooftops and the domes, the towers and the water. You hear it, don't you? That stillness. The kind that only comes after the worst is over, but the memory still lingers like a fingerprint on glass. You're safe now, or at least safer. You've walked through a city undone by invisible hands, watched it unravel, stitch itself back together with trembling fingers. You've seen how people mourn, rebuild, sing through grief, and light candles not just for the dead, but for those still breathing. It's quieter now inside you, too. The fear has softened. The stories remain. The sky above Constantinople stretches wide and calm, and the sea hums a lullaby you almost forgot you knew. Let yourself drift now. Let the images blur. Ivy crawling up old marble, children laughing near fig trees, monks singing under the vaulted gold of Hagia Sophia. Let the sound of sandals on stone become just a heartbeat. Yours. And as your breath deepens, let this last thought settle with you. You endured. Not as a hero, not untouched, but still here, still here, still here.